Welcome into another Dynasty Rankings video. We are just a mere few weeks away from the kickoff of the NFL. We already got preseason rolling. I got Ryan Cash Sharma to my left, Lucas Hoy to my right. Guys, we've already done running backs and wide receivers. We're now hopping into the tight ends. I feel like not much has shifted. We know who the elites are, and then we kind of just balance out the rest. But let's take a look at how they were in 2025. A clean sweep of the top two last year with Bowers and McBride. Lucas and I had Laporta at the 3. Ryan early on Loveland at the 3. We had both Loveland at the 4, and him had Laporta at the 4. After that, you've got a few shakeups. Got T.J. Hawkinson in there, Tyler Warren, Tucker Kraft, Kyle Pitts, Dalton Kincaid, Mark Andrews, likely Pitts all over, Jake Ferguson. Any takeaways, guys? Any takeaways? Lucas, we'll start with you there.
I mean, it's really similar, like with the exception of a few names. And I feel like just some common themes that I'm sure we'll talk about as we get further into this conversation will be that there really is like such a strong top few. And then I think that the next like 10 to 12 guys, it really is just so much of a toss up. Like you can justify so many of these guys falling higher or lower in each of our lists. And there's really not too many new names, which I guess is expected between last year and what we'll see with this year's list. So excited to talk about some of the trends kind of up and down that list for the names that carry over. But yeah, honestly, a lot of similarities from what I saw.
Ryan.
Yeah, I agree. Like the top end is pretty solidified. I will say this year might be a stronger top 10, just kind of looking at some of those names last year. Like we were kind of throwing in the Isaiah Likeleys and the Jake Fergusons, some of those names. So it seems like this year maybe it's more solidified and, better names because of the rookies and the young players that came up. But yeah, excited to get into it.
Yeah, I'm super hyped. Lucas, who was the first player that just missed your list that we just got to give a shout out to today?
Yeah, for me, it's going to be Kyle Pitts. It's a guy who I've historically been really high on at times, but also I think now I'm probably lower than the public on, and a lot of that comes from the peaks of those emotions. I drafted him really early in startups and kind of built teams around him just to be disappointed. But I'm happy to see that he did have another really productive season last year after his rookie season just kind of felt like a flash in the pan. So I can definitely see him, cracking even like the top 5 on a more consistent basis if we were to do like an end of the year ranking after this upcoming season. But really just depends on that quarterback play that they're going to get down in Atlanta and how he fits into the offense with the new guy past the kind of Penix era, if that's what ends up shaking out.
Yeah, Kyle Pitts out of the top 10. We'll touch on that, I'm sure, shortly in this video. Ryan, who's the first one off your list?
Yeah, I'd say for me it was probably Kenyon Sadiq. And that's just because Kenyon Sadiq is a first round prospect, tight end, pretty rare. So I think he definitely deserves some respect in a dynasty format just for that. But otherwise, it's like a lot of things I just didn't like about him was the landing spot. Obviously going to the New York Jets, a lot of different names in the building there, different, not a very good system. And yeah, I just don't know how he's going to carve out a role for himself in this offense. So I'm a little bit lower on Kenyon Sadiq than most, but at the same time, I do respect the fact that he's a first round tight end. And that's what kind of had me debating whether or not to include him. But just out of situation, I decided to leave him off.
Yeah, for me, I think it was Oronde Gadsden. I like what I like. You guys know I like my Chargers now. Lad McConkey, Omari, and Hampton. We're going to talk about Justin Herbert here as well very shortly, I'm sure. But Oronde Gadsden, man, he is, in my eyes, kind of like a poor boy, like Bowers and Loveland. Like this guy was getting open downfield. He was able to separate from safeties and linebackers with ease. I just don't think he has the overall skill set to be this all-around tight end talent overall. But he had some, I think he's more of like your boom. If you need a big game and you're maybe playing a top opponent, that's somebody you want to have in your lineup because that is a guy who can go for 7 receptions and 100 yards. But he also is going to get not necessarily a ton of looks always, but he's just got a weird skill set that I kind of like. But let's go ahead and get into it. 10 through 6 right here, right now. Ryan, you've got Kittle, Eli Stowers, the rookie of the Philadelphia Eagles, Kyle Pitts, Tyler Warren at the 7, and then Harold Fannin Jr. Lucas, you've got Stowers, Kittle, and Sadiq, both rookies cracking your top 10, and then Harold Fannin and Sam Laporta, and then I've got Kenyon Sadiq, the only rookie cracking my top 10. Kittle at the 9, Pitts at the 8, Fannin at the 7, and Laporta at the 6. Rookies, Kenyon Sadiq and Eli Stowers both made Lucas's list. Only rookie in your top 10, Ryan. Why Stowers over Sadiq?
Yeah, I actually think going back to our prospect rankings, like I had them very close. I did have Sadiq number 1, but Stowers was not too far behind. A lot of like the analytical guys would tell you that Stowers actually had a more impressive college profile just from his production standpoint. Both kind of similar players in the sense that they're very much receiving tight ends. They're not exactly inline blockers, which should bode well for fantasy for both of them. So then what it really came down for me was just purely situation. And I think Eli Stowers has a really great opportunity in Philly to potentially be the number 2 option there at some point. I know Mekhi Lemon and Devontae Smith are there, but I think this guy can be like a very trusted underneath weapon slot kind of guy as well. And maybe it might not come this year. Like this could be a learning type of year. Still, they have Dallas Goedert, and I think Stowers has a long way to go in terms of development. But I do think at some point later on this season, and then even going into next year, he's really going to establish himself as a big part of this offense and somebody that you're going to want to get your hands on because it's a Philadelphia Eagles tight end. I mean, those never go wrong. And I just feel like in this kind of system and with Jalen Hurts and just Philadelphia's offense historically being very productive, especially compared to the Jets, like I'd rather have Eli Stowers personally.
Okay, not bad. And Lucas, you got them both. How close are they in your eyes, would you say?
Yeah, I think my really last 4 in this list are really close in value. I think that even though I think there's a lot of issues with the situation in New York for Kenyon Sadiq, I think that he has a better opportunity to score more this year. And I think of the tight end position in particular, like that's where a lot of the value is coming from. There's not really enough value across the board. Excuse me. Just playing one tight end in most leagues where you can afford to kind of have someone on your roster who's going to take 2, 3 years to blossom. You can stash, 5, 10 running backs and wide receivers, and you're happy with that. But you can't really afford to miss out on productivity when you only play one tight end each week. So I think if Sadiq scores more this year, which I think he will, he's going to have that value. But a lot of the good things that Ryan mentioned about Stowers, I still see as well. I think he's just developing into that true tight end position. And there are still some targets to go out there with Devontae Smith, Mekhi Lemon, of course. So maybe he will crack his way into that top 3 and kind of be what Colston Loveland was to the Bears last year. But for now, I think that it's going to take a little bit more time to come.
Yeah, Stowers has kind of, in my eyes, been in that tweener role where it's like if this guy drops like 10 pounds, we could just be considering him a big wide receiver. But I still like the upside with him in that offense. I'm still rolling with Sadiq. That's what my prospect rankings were. As good as spread out as the Jets offense is, I do think that there's an opportunity where Geno Smith can find Kenyon Sadiq the ball. He can use his physicality and his speed to get open quickly. Geno Smith isn't what he really used to be anymore, so I'm sure he's looking for a safe option. I do think Sadiq could be that. There is a name that all 3 of us got on here, and he's 32 years old, and he just tore his Achilles, and yet here we are. We're still buying into George Kittle. Lucas, you're not buying the decline I guess none of us are, but you're really not either?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I'm definitely not anticipating this to be long-term value, but I think he offers so much more in the short term than like Sadiq, Fannin, Stowers. I think Laporta on a good year is probably up there with him. So we'll go that far, but I think like for the next year, and as long as he's healthy, and maybe it is only 2 more years, 3 more years. Maybe it's more, just 1 year, but I think this year in particular, he's going to be top 3, top 4 in points at the position. And again, just with the scarcity, you got to really nail that because if not, it can easily just be a hole in your lineup each week if you don't have someone strong there. So knowing what you're going to get as long as he is healthy there's a lot of value in that in my eyes.
Yeah, I'm definitely buying into the decline. I mean, I think he was number 5 on my list last year. So he did fall to number 10, but at the same time, like Lucas was saying, like just in a pure like redraft kind of standpoint, I do think he's probably the number 1 or 2 tight end. Just in terms of like guys I would trust if fully healthy on a week in, week out basis. I mean, Trey McBride's the other one for me where I would say like, yeah, he's for sure going to give you like 100 yards or a touchdown. Like George Kittle's like a lock for 15 fantasy points if he's playing. So I just think the value in that from the tight end position is just so rare to the point where he still does have to crack the top 10, even if it's only for another year or two. But yeah, still kind of dropped pretty far from me just because the guys ahead of him are either younger or just less injury prone, to be honest.
Yeah, we did have a really good young class last year in the 2025 draft class. A lot of really stellar rookies, I would say. But yeah, I mean, you guys are nailing it on the head here. When he's on the field, he's going to be consistently putting up top 3 to 5 numbers, like you said, even maybe 1 or 2. And he signed he's got 4 years left on his contract in San Francisco. I think that we could still be looking at like 2 to 3 really good years of George Kittle football, despite his age. I mean, when he is on the field, he still got it. So it's like, at that point, that's where the value is. Like, if he's balling, he's a valuable asset no matter what. You can take the Achilles into account. You can take the age into account. He's still got to be cracking your top 10s. That's a no-brainer. Let's talk about Kyle Pitts, though, Ryan. This is a little bit more. We've talked about Kyle Pitts last year. Lucas started off with Kyle Pitts, and then you started to become the Kyle Pitts truther, and then you traded him to me, and now I'm the Kyle Pitts believer. All three of us have gone through the trifecta. I haven't even had a season with him yet, but I'm really buying into what I am seeing. But do you think that we can rely on him consistently, Ryan, to do what he did last year?
What a fool. You're such a fool. You're going to learn in a couple of years. It's funny because I have him at number 8, but I really don't believe in Kyle Pitts at all. Really, like he just seemingly always like falls into his production, if that makes sense. Like you don't know how he does it. It doesn't seem like on a week in, week out basis, he's very consistent, but at the end of the day, he does put up the numbers. And last year he did have a very good year in totality. I did kind of dig through some of those numbers though, and a lot of it came in like a 3-game stretch where Drake London was out. So I think that kind of inflated things. But yeah, I mean, Kyle Pitts is he's such a good, a talented tight end, and he's going to produce very good receiving numbers because he's basically just a big receiver. Still very young. I feel like he kind of has to be in this top 10, but I don't believe in him in any way just because his offense isn't very good. His quarterback situation isn't very good. And then he just has some weird, like, I don't know if they're character flaws, but it doesn't seem like he shows up every week to me.
Yeah, Lucas, he's out of your top 10 now. I mean, so you're completely sold?
Yeah, I mean, I think like we've probably seen his ceiling, at least in the situation that he's in. Like maybe in a year or two, he finds himself on a new offense and becomes more of a focal point. But that team's, personality is going to be through Bijan Robinson and Drake London's, a fantastic number one wide receiver to have on your team. So I don't really see like him popping off or doing much more than he did last year in like a successful Atlanta offense. And so I don't know. I think we've seen what we're going to get out of Kyle Pitts at his best, and barring some major change, which, like I said, he's probably my number 11 here, so he could easily work his way back into this top 10 list. But yeah, I don't know. I just think that there's a little bit more optimism with some of the younger guys in my top 10, and there's a little bit more proven productivity in some of the other guys.
I can see that. I can see that because I do agree. I do feel like we've probably seen not necessarily the ceiling, but at least he's not going to hit that elite ceiling that we all thought he was going to after his rookie season. This is what I think we could maybe get more consistently of these 800, 900 yard seasons. The funniest thing is he's improved his touchdown numbers by 1 every single year. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And last year, the interesting thing about him when I was diving into his numbers was his average depth of target in his yards before catch were like 2 to 3 yards shorter in both categories, which I kind of like that role for him. He's using an athleticism to get open early instead of deeper, getting open quicker instead of deeper. And in my opinion, that could lead to maybe more targets and more receptions, both of which he led or were career highs for him last year. So if they can continue that role and Stefanski can kind of notice that his role in 2025 really seemed to fit his skill set better than maybe becoming this deep threat tight end like we kind of saw at Florida and in that year 1 of Atlanta's offense, then I could see him consistently being a 800, 900 yard guy with a few touchdowns under his belt. And if you're getting that out of the tight end position, that's valuable. So maybe he can stick with this new role and just be more of this underneath guy than this necessarily deep threat. Let's talk about Tyler Warren here. We will address him a little bit later in the show as well when me and Lucas get our top 5s in there, but down to 7 or not, I guess up from 9 to 7, Ryan, but you're not buying the sophomore hype of Tyler Warren.
No, and I do understand that he has a chance of being the number one option in this Colts offense, which I think earns him that spot at 7 for me, which is higher than I normally probably would have put him. But with Pittman departing and the weapons around him looking a little shaky, I see that. But I'm just not bought into the player at all. Like I think his route tree is disgusting in a bad way. Like if you look at it, it really is just all underneath. Like you were talking about average depth of target with Pitts being a good thing, but for Warren, I mean, I think it really shows how he isn't able to separate down the field. He doesn't really have receiver skills. He's kind of like your old school, like 1990s, 1980s tight end, where it's like you can put him in the wildcat, you can put him at fullback. He's just kind of like a run you over physical football player. So which is valuable for sure. I mean, Rob Gronkowski was kind of like that in a lot of ways, but I just think that all of his value is going to come from manufactured touches. And I think it's kind of harder to rely on that than someone like a Harold Fannin or other tight ends we'll get to later that have legitimate receiver upside and are kind of just the modern tight end that are more so like you can line them up outside and they can win against defensive backs that, get in and out of their breaks really well. So, yeah, I mean, Tyler Warren, he kind of just reminds me of like the wide receiver, or I mean, the tight end version of like Debo Samuel or like DJ Moore. And I think at some point, some people would have said those guys are like top 10 dynasty weapons. But I just think like the true 3-level player is always going to, outlast the manufactured touch player.
I think that's fair. And you like Fannin more as well, though?
Yeah, I think Fannin showed that legitimate upside. Also has a chance of being the number one in Cleveland, and I think he showed legit 3-level potential as a receiver.
Okay. I don't mind that. Let's get into some top fives here real quick, though. Ryan, you've got Laporta at your 5, Kraft at your 4, Loveland at the 3, and McBride at the 2. Lucas, me and you go toe for toe here with 5, 4, 3, and 2 with Warren, Kraft, Loveland, and McBride. Lucas, Sam Laporta falls behind Kraft and Loveland. We had them both at 4 both at 3 last year. Kraft and Warren takes over the spot. How close are, let's say, those 3 players in your eyes? Laporta, Warren, and Kraft.
Yeah, that's a tier of its own for me. I think the 6, 5, and 4 for me was the toughest to really differentiate. I think with Laporta, his situation didn't necessarily improve, but I think both Warren and Kraft's did. Kraft with a few wide receivers leaving, a little bit more emphasis on Matthew Golden, who I'm not really going to trust, and he obviously had the injury last year, where he's going to come back and put up some really big numbers for a couple weeks there when he was healthy. So I think Kraft's really got the best situation of that bunch and has shown that he does have that big game potential. Warren, then, really, it is just like the second best situation. Like I agree with a lot of the things that Ryan said. I guess I just put a little bit more value in what that'll actually lead to, I think, on paper. So I'm cool with Warren. I don't ever think that he's going to be seen as like the number one tight end in the league or ever really going to have that super high of a ceiling. But I think that Laporte is dealing with a lot more target competition. We kind of saw him take a step back when he was healthy last year in the offense. And, I don't think that the Gibbs extension really impacts what they're going to see with him, but it's clear that he is like the number one focal point in Detroit, the same way that Bijan is in Atlanta, with then still having a star wide receiver until you're going to get the touches. So it is really close for me, but I do like the opportunity for really valuable targets and touches for Tucker Kraft out of the bunch.
Yeah, I agree. I think those 3 to me are extremely similar. I even would almost be okay putting Harold Fannin kind of into that mix, maybe limiting the ceiling because it is the Browns, but having a real opportunity to fight for that number 1. And he clicked very well with Shadur Sanders last year. Is that going to be Shadur Sanders' offense? I don't know. Do we have full faith in Todd Monken to get him the ball with now Concepcion in Boston there? I don't know. I like Monken. I think Fannin could really be not necessarily a star, but could really find himself in this tier. And then with Warren and Kraft, I think like their situations are so similar. Like Pierce and Christian Watson, Golden and Josh Downs, and then you've got Tucker Kraft and Tyler Warren. And I guess I just trust the Packers offense a little bit more. And I do think Kraft, I don't know, because I do think that Warren is probably better after the catch and a more physical presence, but Kraft really does have that open field speed where he can go. I do think Tyler Warren also kind of did it on a more consistent basis. Like Kraft had those really two huge games. Warren had more 10-point performances through the first 8 weeks of comparing the two, more 15-point performances. Kraft just had these two really massive games and then a few duds in there as well. So I think within the Colts offense, Warren could maybe be more consistent, but I really don't think that he has the ceiling that Kraft has in the Packers offense. Ryan, touch on Tucker Kraft and your thoughts on the player.
Yeah, I'm really big on Tucker Kraft. Like you guys were saying, I think he's clearly the number one in Green Bay. I'm not really buying the Matthew Golden thing either. I feel like he was like momentum wise. I get what you're talking about compared to Tyler Warren. Like they kind of are somewhat similar players. I do think Kraft has more receiving ability, but I also just felt like Kraft had more momentum going into his injury. Like Kraft really seemed like he was emerging as like a superstar type of tight end. Was really putting together some big like tight end one type of numbers, like tight end one overall type of numbers. And I think and then he got hurt, and then Tyler Warren more so like emerged really early on, but then we at least saw him kind of dip and hit a wall. So I just think with Kraft, he's got a little bit more positive momentum here. And then the offense, obviously Green Bay versus Indy, I would rather have the number one in the Packers offense than Indianapolis's. So that's what puts Tucker Kraft at 4 for me, even ahead of someone like Laporta, who I'm really high on, but also isn't in any way going to be the number one in his offense.
Yeah, I do think like Warren could be really good, but I'm so worried about the long term of like Daniel Jones and Shane Steichen, because those first 9 weeks, those three were like, firing on all cylinders together. Yeah. But I mean, we're talking about an 8-week sample size here. Am I really going to buy that? Like, at least with Kraft, I can buy into, like, we've seen Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love click together for years now. We know that Tucker Kraft can become the number one in this offense for a while and build that connection with those guys. I know that Daniel Jones got an extension, but are we sure that Shane Steichen's going to be there after this year? Are we even sure that Daniel Jones is going to be there after this year? That's what worries me with Warren. I do really like the player, but I think both of them are more the short yardage, get upfield quickly kind of guys, and I think Kraft just has bigger boom in this offense. Let's talk about our guy, though. Colston Loveland solidified himself into all of our top threes. Ryan, he was there for you last year. I do think that this is probably a solo tier player here. Ryan, I'll let you touch on that if you agree with that. I'm sure you do.
Yeah, I definitely do agree with that because he separates himself as a talent from the guys behind him. Like, I truly think he's got Trey McBride, Brock Bowers upside in him. He's just not there yet, obviously. He hasn't proven to be a, top tight end for an extended period of time like those other guys have. But he's clearly on his way. He's extremely young, and he has a chance of being the number one in a very high-powered offense potentially. So I just think he's got a lot of positive momentum. It is weird that he hasn't changed for me in his ranking from last year, even though I feel way better about him this season just based off what he showed. Like I think even though the numbers might not say it, he definitely kind of exceeded my expectations just because of how, strongly he finished. I mean, he showed like 10 target type of potential, number one option, like Caleb's most reliable kind of go-to guy when he had to have a big play. And that just really showcased like, man, this could be the next Kelsey Mahomes. Like, this is looking pretty scary. And I think that's going to carry into this year where Caleb just kind of force feeds him the ball in big spots because he can trust his big target getting open in big situations. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I just don't think he's entered into that tier one yet because he hasn't proven it.
Lucas.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think he stands alone in that he definitely is the third most valuable fantasy tight end. I would love for him to show the consistency that Trey McBride has, and I think that's why Trey McBride is the clear number 2 in my eyes. Loveland's such a fantastic player, though. Like, I think if you look at the Bears pass catchers between him, Roman, Luther Burden, I don't see him being any lower than the number 2 in terms of fantasy production. So I think like he really does have a high floor. We saw how much Caleb trusts him, how much he goes to him. I mean, we've heard, I've seen his name popping up everywhere in terms of training camp, which means so much. But I think it's clear that he's going to be a focal point of this offense, and it's an offense that clearly prioritizes tight ends. We saw early third round draft selection used on the position where we already had, Cole Kmet, who's been a strong player on the team for a long time. Loveland, who really showed that star power, and then again using high draft capital on it. So I just love everything about Colston Loveland as the player and the situation for him. And I think like he has the probably maybe second highest ceiling out of the whole tight end crew, to be honest. So yeah, I'd love to see the consistency. I don't know that it'll come at a Trey McBride level. He's just such a great fantasy player with the amount of targets and catches that he gets. But yeah, love Loveland. I think that his value is just continuing to climb, and we'll potentially see fireworks this season.
Yeah, he really is a rare skill set. This is a guy you can line up all over the field, and he can separate with ease against linebackers and safeties, and he's kind of just a size mismatch for, I'd probably say, like 95% of the cornerbacks in football, if not more. So yeah, he's just a nightmare of a player to guard. We talked about this in our Burden and Odunze video. Like, I feel like he is the safest bet to be the number one option in this offense just because of his skill set. I think that 6-game sample size that we saw from him at the end of the year, where he really kind of started to come on, was some of the best tight end football you could watch last year, if you really dive into it. So I think he showed that, hey, I can be a superstar, like you said, this Mahomes and Kelsey level of a player. That's how good he is. I do think that he can, I think he can reach like the Bowers level ceiling. Like he's so good. He's so fun to watch. He's in a productive offense with a rising quarterback who showed last year that he trusts him. I was talking about that 6-game span. I went through and just did the per game averages. He was like 3 yards shy of Brock Bowers' best 6-game span from his rookie year. He had the second best 6-game span amongst all rookie pass catchers, trailing only Emeka Egbuka, who was on pace to, he was 3 yards shy of Emeka Egbuka as well, and he was on pace to break the rookie receiving record at one point this year. So that goes to show you anything about how good of a back end of the year that Colston Loveland had. That says a lot. Let's talk about now a tier of their own, though. Trey McBride and the number one, Brock Bowers, sweeping again this year, our number one spot. How tight is this race? Because McBride just put up one of the best seasons, but we still all have Bowers at the one. Lucas, how tight is it?
I think it's razor thin margins here. They're different players in different situations. Like I think Brock Bowers is more that boomer bust type guy, and we really don't know what that offense will look like. Like he either could take a huge step forward or maybe even take a step back with, Fernando Mendoza coming into the equation. I know Kirk's probably gonna be that veteran presence early on and be his first quarterback, and I trust him to support a strong fantasy asset like Brock Bowers. But that situation is different. New coach, new a lot of things, and the same can be said for Trey McBride in terms of the coaching staff. But there is clearly a connection with him and Jacoby Brissett last year, and so he's definitely going to put up numbers early and often. So, I think for me, it's just Brock Bowers is kind of like that creative player. Like if you were to just put, create a tight end in a lab, it's going to come out looking like Brock Bowers. The ceiling's just incredible there. I think he's the only one who really has everything that Colston Loveland has, and maybe then some you can make the argument for. So, interested to see what that can turn into. But I do think that Trey McBride's the safer bet for this upcoming season.
Yeah, it was extremely close for me too. I was kind of going back and forth, but yeah, I mean, Brock Bowers is like that all-time tight end type of talent. Like even going back to Georgia, just once in a generation type of player there. And I also just kind of looking at the situation. I kind of see Brock Bowers as more of like this clear, standalone target in Las Vegas, which could be a good offense not only this year but going forward with Mendoza and Kubiak. Like seeing what that turns into. Whereas like McBride, I know he's established himself, but there are a lot of mouths there to feed, surprisingly, like with Marv and Michael Wilson took a step forward last year. And now we got Jeremiah Love in the mix as well. there's a lot going on there for an offense that I don't think is going to be very good. So it kind of makes you like think about how is he exactly going to get his numbers? How are all those mouths going to be fed? But I mean, in reality, like there shouldn't be a huge concern. I do also kind of go with McBride in just like a redraft format. Like I think he's more safe this year, just because we don't know what the Raiders are going to be. But I'm just more so betting on the talent of Brock Bowers and going forward, Mendoza being the guy in Las Vegas, really.
Yeah, I think for me, I think Bowers is 3 years younger, and I have extreme confidence that he's going to be able to do what Trey McBride is doing right now. I think whether you want to talk about the skill set or like the skill players between the offenses, I do think I have more faith in what the Raiders are building right now with Kubiak, and I do think that needs to come into play. Yeah, for 2026, you could probably bet on McBride to have more, but I think long-term vision here, I think Brock Bowers is going to really put up McBride level seasons. And like you said, he's got the perfect build, everything to him. He just screams tight end. Like that is the guy. That's who you look at. So, yeah, I'm bought all the way in on Brock Bowers, eventually doing what McBride's doing now and doing it for a very long time. So, yeah, give me the 3 years of age on that. And I think just the better outlook situation, in my opinion, than McBride. So more of a long-term piece here, as hard as it is to pick against the guy who just put up like a 330-point tight end season and is still only, 27 years old. So there you have it. Those are our top 10 lists. We got the quarterbacks left, and then we're going to be drafting a sleeper team, and that'll be all the Dynasty content we have left until we kick the football off on September 9th. So excited. Less than a month away from the National Football League. Shout out Ryan Cash Sharma. Shout out Lucas for turning in. We'll talk to you guys soon. Peace.